Hey there, and welcome back to the Route 1 Rundown. I'm your host, Steve Gorgie, and I'm thrilled to be back for another episode to talk some Terps. Since the last time we spoke, Buzz Williams makes some official additions to his staff. The Big Ten announces Maryland's opponents and where they'll play them, and the Terps have added 2 players to their roster, bringing the total up to 10 for 2026, and one of them is a McDonald's All-American. But before I dive into that, just a reminder that this show is on YouTube and part of the Department of Hoops, a DMV media network. So if you're listening to this show in audio form, but you'll want to watch it, you got to go to YouTube and check it out. That's youtube.com/@Department of Hoops. Once you get there, hit that podcast tab and you'll see all the episodes of this show. So no matter where you're listening, please like the episode, leave a comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share it with a friend who loves the Terps, because all of that stuff, but really sharing it helps this show grow, and I appreciate it. You can also find me all across the internet, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky. It's all at the same handle. It's at Gorg on Sports. There's a ton going on right now between the beltways. So if you love local sports, whether you're a Baltimore sports fan, whether you're a DC sports fan, whether you like a combination of those teams, maybe you're an Orioles and a Caps fan, you gotta check me out there all across the internet at Gorgon Sports. I'm launching something new. It's called the 295 Sports Minute. It's going to be the topics that matter to you most locally in 1 minute or less, and that's going to be across all of those platforms. So if you're into that, if you're into national college basketball talk, national college football talk, some sports gambling talk, make sure you're following me at Gorg on Sports. But on this show today, we will start with Maryland landing Darius Adams, originally from New Jersey, a 6'5" combo guard. He played his past couple of seasons at La Lumiere in Indiana. It's one of these schools that plays a national schedule as part of Nike's EYBL Scholastic circuit, and he is a guy that is top of the top when it comes to the class of 2025. He's a McDonald's All-American. He was committed to Dan Hurley and UConn. He decommitted in April when it looked like UConn's backcourt was going to be pretty crowded between some guys returning, between some guys they brought in the transfer portal, and he decided to decommit from the team that has won 2 of the 3 last national titles. He opened up his recruitment, and he became a Maryland Terrapin. And this is, to me, the most exciting addition that Buzz Williams has made since he's come to Maryland. Yes, it was awesome to get some of those guys from Texas A&M. Pharrell Payne is a guy who is probably going to be, I don't think it's a stretch to say, Maryland's best player next season, or at least in contention. A guy that's going to need to do a lot on a night-in and night-out basis. Solo Washington is a guy that Buzz Williams has raved about. I think he's in contention to be a fan favorite for the little things that he does, the way he plays, the hustle plays, the defensive effort. It was great to get some of those experienced guys coming over from Texas A&M. It was great to get a guy like Miles Rice, who has been a big-time scorer at Washington State. He goes to Indiana, doesn't have the season he probably expected last year, but it's a guy who has shown flashes, who has done it at the big-time college basketball level. It's great to get guys like that. It's great to get his former teammate Isaiah Watts, who comes over from Washington State. He had an increased role for the Cougars last season after they turned over a lot of their roster. It's critical in this day and age of college basketball to get those kind of guys. But this is an addition. This is an add in Darius Adams, the 6'5" combo guard, that just gets you excited, because in the history of Maryland basketball, Maryland famously does not get a lot of McDonald's All-Americans. Since Gary Williams retired, here's the entire list. Derek Queen last season. Before that, Jalen Smith sticks in the class of 2018. Diamond Stone in 2015, Melo Trimble in 2014, and before that, you have to go all the way back to the class of 2003 when Gary Williams landed who? Mike Jones. That's how far you have to go back. Look, since 2003, they've landed 5, now 6 guys that were McDonald's All-Americans with the addition of Darius Adams. This is a program that famously won a national championship without having a single McDonald's All-American on the team. So it's exciting when you can land a player the caliber of Darius Adams. It's exciting because Maryland hasn't done it a whole lot in its history. It's exciting because a lot of those guys that I just ran through have made huge impacts on the program. Derek Queen, I could have done an episode twice a week throughout the entire season this year, just raving about Derek Queen, and I felt like I did over the course of the season. I could not have praised him more. He was one of the most fun players I have ever watched during his time at Maryland, and I cannot say enough about what Derek Queen brought to the table. Jalen Smith before that, he was a critical piece of some good Maryland teams, and he's a guy who ended up being an NBA draft pick. Melo Trimble, a guy who you could kind of say saved the program under Mark Turgeon. Let's just put it this way. If it's not for Melo Trimble, if Melo Trimble does not come to Maryland, Mark Turgeon misses the tournament 3 years in a row, his first 3 years at Maryland. Mark Turgeon does not make it into the 2021-2022 season. In fact, I think if Mark Turgeon misses a 4th straight tournament, he would have been done at Maryland. I think you can very easily say Melo Trimble saved his job and really injected some much-needed life into a program that was looking to find its way, especially as Maryland entered the Big Ten. Those 3 guys have been hugely impactful players to this Maryland basketball program. Diamond Stone, there just a year. He had an up and down season in his 1 season at Maryland. I don't think he ever quite lived up to the expectations. Mike Jones was a guy who stayed 4 years. And, Mike Jones, I think, gets a little bit of a bad rap just because of the expectations. But he was a guy who contributed to some good Maryland teams. He was also on some Maryland teams that did not live up to expectations, that disappointed in an era where Maryland was expected to take a next step. But of those 5 guys, 3 of them had major impacts on this program. Mike Jones is a player who was there 4 years and was a key part of a good 2007 Maryland team. He was a member of that 2004 ACC Tournament Championship team. He is a guy who maybe he's never going to be confused with Melo Trimble, with Sticks, with Derek Queen, but he's a guy who is a major contributor. So Maryland has not gotten a lot of these guys over the course of my time watching Maryland basketball, over the course of anybody's time watching Maryland basketball. So for Maryland to get a guy like Darius Adams, who is a McDonald's All-American, who was originally committed to UConn, who was being recruited by the likes of Alabama, Tennessee, Michigan State, for Maryland to win that recruitment, to win that commitment. And, it was thought that when he opened it back up, some of those programs that were recruiting him originally would have the upper hand, like a Tennessee. And we know about the deep pockets in the SEC at Tennessee and Alabama, and that football money and that the amount in NIL that they have been able to offer, and the amount of investment in basketball, which has really helped push those programs to a next level. We know about that. Everybody knows about that. And for Maryland to get the commitment of Darius Adams, who was originally wanted by those types of programs, by a Michigan State program, that Michigan State, I think, is one of the more underrated recruiting programs in the country, for the guys that Tom Izzo is able to go out and get, and then what he's able to do with those guys, the kind of the way he's able to get them to fit into roles, come together as a team. I can't say enough about that. But Maryland went out and got a guy who was wanted by the elite programs in the sport. And make no mistake about it, Tennessee and Alabama at this point, they are elite programs in the sport because of their recent success, because of their investment in basketball, because of their ability to invest in NIL. They are elite programs in the sport. UConn has won 2 of the last 3 national championships. Michigan State is Michigan State. I don't need to say any more than that. But that is the group of schools that was originally recruiting Darius Adams. And I know when he opened up his recruitment, it seemed like Tennessee was very much going to be a school that was in contention for him. But Maryland ends up coming out on top. And I don't know who all pushed once he opened up his recruitment again. I don't know how hard they pushed. But what I do know is who was recruiting him initially. And those are all schools that are among the elite of the elite in college basketball right now. If I asked you right now, what's the next school to win a national championship that has not yet ever won one in their history? I think Alabama is right at the top of the list. I think Tennessee is right up there at the top of the list. You could probably put Gonzaga up there, although they've fallen off a little bit in the past couple of years. I still think you have to put them up there. But Tennessee and Alabama, to me, those would be names that come right to the top of my head when I say, what is the next school to win their first national championship? It's a question that gets asked a lot in the offseason in football. Oregon, frequently the answer there. In basketball, I think Tennessee and Alabama have to be right up at the very top of that list. And those are the kinds of programs that wanted Darius Adams. Michigan State is the type of program that wanted Darius Adams. UConn, the program that has won 2 of the 3 last national championships, wanted and got a commitment from Darius Adams. And when Adams was committed to the Huskies, Dan Hurley had some really good things to say about him. One of the things that stood out to me was that he talked about his size and skill at the guard spot. He talked about how he's a guy who can score at all 3 levels. He talked about versatile guards that they've had in the past, like Andre Jackson, like Jordan Hawkins, like Steph Castle, like Tristan Newton, like Cam Spencer. And he kind of indirectly compared Darius Adams to those guys. Darius Adams is a guy who kind of fits that mold for Dan Hurley. He talked about how he's able to shoot the 3 ball, he can get his own shot, that his size, his length to guard, and that was one of the things that stood out to me is Dan Hurley talking about his ability to guard, talking about his offensive versatility and his ability to guard. And then his high school coach at La Lumiere, Pat Holmes, talked about how UConn was talking about that Adams fit the mold of their great guards, again, like Jordan Hawkins. So to me, that's a rave review. When you're talking about a guy like Jordan Hawkins, who was a member of their national championship team. I can't remember exactly where he went in the NBA draft. 14th overall for Jordan Hawkins. To me, the fact that Dan Hurley wanted him, that Dan Hurley kind of indirectly or when talking to Adams and his coach, Pat Holmes, talked about Jordan Hawkins and some of their guards and felt like he fit the mold of a UConn guard. The fact that he talked about his ability to defend, his versatility on the offensive end, his size, his length. To me, that is a rave review from one of the best coaches in the country and a reason to be very, very excited about Darius Adams. When you read the scouting reports on Darius Adams, what you see come up time and time again is his ability to shoot, his ability to score. Those are the pros, and that's what you always see. Now, something I do have my eye on is that in his high school season for La Lumiere, in the EYBL Scholastic League play, in 11 games, he actually shot 18 of 64 from beyond the arc, which is not a great percentage. I believe it's under 30%, 18 of 64, just 28%. Now, I believe he shot much better in his junior season, and it looks like he was asked to carry a very heavy load in that league for his team. He led the team in field goal attempts. He led the team in scoring over the course of those 11 games with just under 17 points per game. He was a high volume game. Now, from the free throw line, he shot 86%, which I think is a very good sign. So everything you read from a scouting report perspective raves about his ability to shoot the ball, and they say that's the thing they think will translate first at the next level. But when you look at those stats, it is a little eyebrow raising. I'm always going to be honest on this show. I've watched him play a half of basketball, and I think when you're watching high school guys, you really have to watch full games. I've watched him play a half of basketball against Brewster Academy, which is another UIBL Scholastic team, a very good team, a team with some very talented players on it, very similar to like a Montverde where Derek Queen and Cooper Flagg came from. I watched him play a half of basketball there. So I don't think I'm a Darius Adams expert. I'll defer to the people who do this day in and day out, who go and watch all these guys play all year long. I'll defer to Dan Hurley. I'll defer to Tom Izzo, to Rick Barnes, to Nate Oates, guys who really wanted Darius Adams. Now, when you think about the cons, when you read the scouting reports, the one thing that always comes up is his lean frame. He's listed at 6'5" right now, 6'5", 165. You see a lot of talk of growing into his body, needing to put on weight, learn how to use his frame, and that's to be expected, I think, at times from a guy who is going to be a freshman. But that is something, if you're thinking about, okay, how does he contribute next season? How does he contribute in the 2026 season? Where might he have problems? That could be something that could cause him some problems in a very physical league in the Big Ten. But all in all, when you land a McDonald's All-American, especially when you land a McDonald's All-American as a coach that took a job about a month ago, that is reason to be very excited. That is reason to celebrate. And this is a really big deal for the Maryland basketball program. Now, he was not the only player that Maryland added since the last time we spoke. Maryland also added another guard, a 6'4" point guard from Spain, Guillermo Del Pino. He's a guy who will come over from Spain. He'll have 4 years of eligibility. He's currently just 18 years old, turning 19 in January. And I think that's worth noting because a lot of times with some of these international prospects, they can be on the older end. So worth noting, he is 18, turning 19 in January. And he's a guy who's done some impressive things from on an international stage and has that on his resume, has that to his name. In the summer of 2023, he was the MVP of the Under-16 Euro Championship. That was a tournament that Spain won. He averaged just under 15 points per game, 3 assists and 2 steals per game in that tournament. He also shot almost 43% from beyond the arc on nearly 6 attempts per game. He spent last basketball season playing in Spain's 3rd division. He scored 10 points, 2 assists per game in 21 minutes per game, 34% from beyond the arc, 77% from the free throw line. So he's a guy that, of course, there's a lot of unknowns. But what excites me about him is just the fact that Maryland was able to go out, that Buzz Williams and his staff was able to go out and pull one of these European guys. And this isn't just like a mid-major Euro guy that nobody had heard of or nobody wanted. This is a guy that Louisville had been very heavily involved in for a time. And Matt Moderno, the founder of the Department of Hoops, he did a great job on his podcast, Fear the Podcast. If you want to go and listen to that, it's part of the Inside Maryland Sports feed. So wherever you get your podcast, if you go to Inside Maryland Sports, you should be able to find his Fear the Podcast episode on Guillermo Del Pino, where he kind of breaks down his game and what he saw. Really good breakdown, quick 14-minute breakdown there. Matt spent a lot of time watching him and breaking down his game. So I'll defer to Matt on that. It's a great listen. I think you should go listen to it. What I really want to talk about and what excites me about this in a different way than Darius Adams is the fact that Maryland was able to dip into this international market, because it's a market that I think Kevin Willard pretty much ignored while he was here at Maryland. Mark Turgeon dove into it a little bit, but not to the extent of some programs like Gonzaga, like Arizona, and one in this conference that Maryland fans see year in and year out. It's Illinois. And look no further than last season with Kasparis Jakachonis and Tomislav Ivasic, 2 guys from Jakachonis from Lithuania, Ivasic from Croatia. Those were 2 guys who were two of Illinois' best players, and Yakachonis is going to be probably a first-round draft pick when that happens next month in June. He's an NBA guy and will likely be a first-round draft pick. Not sure exactly where they have him in the mocks right now, but either way, he's a guy who will play in the league. He's a guy who was very successful coming over from Europe. He is a guy who was a key piece of a tournament team for Illinois. So let's see. Kasparis Yakachonis, right now looking at NBA.com, their mock draft, number 11 to the Miami Heat. So that's the kind of player Illinois was able to go over to Europe and get. And this season, the class of 2025, they have 2 Serbian commits coming in. So this is a market that I think has been largely untapped by Maryland, and I think it is impressive that Maryland and this staff led by Buzz Williams was able to go over to Spain and get a guy who had previously been involved with Louisville, who has some good experience, some accolades at the international level, and I don't know whether he'll be great. I don't know whether he'll be a bust. But what I do know is I'm excited the fact that Maryland is starting to utilize this market and they were able to go get a guy like him so quickly after getting on campus. So I think this was a really great 10 days or so for Buzz Williams and his staff, going and getting Darius Adams, a proven guy at the high school level, a McDonald's All-American, the kind of guy that Maryland has not gotten that much over the years, regardless of who the head coach is. And then going and dipping into this European market, a market that's proving more and more fruitful for so many college basketball teams throughout the country. Now the roster continues to grow, as does the coaching staff. What was, I think, an open secret for a while became official as Maryland announced that Buzz Williams has added Devin Johnson as an associate head coach, Lyle Wolf as an assistant coach, Steve Rockefort as an assistant coach, and Wabisa Bede as an assistant coach. And what you will notice with all 4 of these guys is these are guys that Buzz Williams trusts and that have been with him for a long time. And I talked about it a lot on last week's episode about how what's become very clear with Buzz Williams is that he is going to do things his way with his guys. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not here to judge that. That's up for you to decide, and the results will bear that out ultimately. But all 4 of these assistant coaches are guys that he knows and trusts. Devin Johnson enters his 14th season overall as a member of Buzz Williams' coaching staff. He was with him at Marquette, he was with him at Virginia Tech, and he was with him at A&M, and he is a guy who was a former student assistant for Williams all the way back when he was the head coach at New Orleans. That's how long Devin Johnson and Buzz Williams goes back. When you think about Johnson, you also often hear him referred to as the defensive coordinator of the staff. He is a guy who is really focused on the defensive end of things, and A&M had some good defenses the past few years under Buzz Williams. Lyle Wolf also enters his 14th year overall as a member of Buzz's staff. He was at Marquette, Virginia Tech, and A&M, and he was a grad assistant going back to Marquette. Steve Rockefort, he's the junior member of the staff, of those 3 guys anyway, just his 9th year. He'll enter his 9th year as part of Buzz's staff. He spent 4 seasons at A&M with Buzz, and he was part of his staff at Virginia Tech as well. He's a guy with some head coach experience, was the head coach at Lamar from 2006 to 2011. So all 3 of those guys were assistant coaches under Buzz Williams at Virginia Tech, but go back so much longer than that. And it's very clear that Buzz Williams values having guys that he trusts around him. And look no further than those 3 guys. And then Wabisa Bede, a guy who played for Buzz at Virginia Tech. This will be his first full season as an assistant coach. He spent 4 years on the staff at A&M in a support role, but he is, again, a guy who played for Buzz Williams, who was on staff at Texas A&M, and now he gets an opportunity to take a step up into an on-court coaching role. So, like I said last week, Buzz Williams values having his guys doing it his way. This comes as no surprise when you look at the staff and these official announcements that have been made. Final topic for today is that the Big Ten announced which opponents Maryland will play and where in this upcoming season. Now, the Big Ten is an 18-team league now. It's massive. It's way too big, if you ask me. And they play a 20-game schedule. What that means is you play 7 teams at home only, 7 teams on the road only, and you play a home and home with 3 of them. Now, something I want to do, especially more over the course of the offseason here, is I want to spend a little more time in some of these episodes looking around the Big Ten and even around the country. Because one of the things that I know personally, when I listen to shows, when I read things, I like the context of how this impacts this team in the broader context. What is going on? How does what's going on nationally impact this team? Where does Maryland stack up in the Big Ten, in the league? It can be really easy to get so focused and so siloed just on the team that you love. But how do they stack up compared to the rest of the league, the rest of the country? How are what they doing different or similar to what is going on in the rest of the league, rest of the country? So this will definitely be something that I try to make it an increased part of the show, talking more about the rest of the league, more about the rest of the country as it relates to Maryland. Look, I'm not going to start doing 20-minute monologues on North Carolina and Hubert Davis's situation there without relating it back to Maryland. Anything that I'm talking about as it relates to the rest of the Big Ten or the rest of the country will be because there's something particular about it that is helpful to know as a Maryland fan. And of course, always good to know your enemy. So over the course of this offseason, one of the things I definitely want to do is go through what teams are adding, what teams are losing, what their outlook is for the 2026 season throughout the Big Ten, because those are the teams that Maryland competes with January through March. If you want to get an NCAA tournament bid, you have to win in your league. All right, so who does Maryland play and where do they play them? They're home. The 3 teams they play, both home and away, are Illinois, Iowa, and Rutgers. And at first glance, when I look at that, I like it because when I look at a schedule, I want to see Maryland play as many good teams as possible. I want to see Maryland get as many opportunities as possible. Look no further than North Carolina this past season. If you play good teams, you will get the benefit of the doubt. North Carolina played a ton of good teams. They basically didn't beat any of them, but they got the benefit of the doubt by the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee. Look at Purdue being higher on the S curve than Maryland. They were both 4 seeds, but Purdue was a little bit ahead of Maryland, and I think that was because of the respective schedule that each of them played. So I am a huge believer you want to challenge yourself as much as possible, because in college basketball, when it comes to tournament time, when it comes to seeding, when it comes to whether you get into the tournament or not, it is all about who you played and if you can beat them. If you play, look no further than the SEC this season. Look at the SEC getting 14 teams in. There were teams with some bad conference records in the SEC that got into the tournament because they were able to pick up quad 1 wins against good teams. No matter the fact that they lost a bunch of quad 1 games too, that really doesn't seem to matter to the selection committee. It's more about how many did you play and how many could you beat. It doesn't really seem to matter how many you lost to. So I like the fact that Maryland has both Illinois and Iowa as far as teams that they play twice. Illinois was a team that was a tournament team this past year. They lose a lot, but in John Fanta's top 25, and look, there's a million way too early top 25s you could look at. I like John Fanta. I think he does a great job. Illinois is number 20. Illinois did a great job in the transfer portal. They have a good recruiting class coming in. If you look at BartTorvik.com and his 2026 projections, he actually has them at number 8. Now, I'm a little skeptical at times about how much you can really use analytics to predict all of this roster turnover and how these teams will gel together, but I think it's worth noting. I think it's at least worth acknowledging that they are number 8 in Bart Torvik at this moment. So that's an opportunity to play what looks like a tournament team, that what looks like probably at this moment a possible protected seed team 2 times. Now, Iowa, a team that's going through a lot of turnover like Maryland. They fire Fran McCaffrey. They part ways with Fran McCaffrey, who had been there for a long time, had a couple disappointing seasons. And in comes Ben McCollum over from Drake. He brings with him point guard Bennett Sturts, and they have a very highly touted, highly rated transfer class. Number 6 overall in 24/7's team rankings. They bring in 8 different guys led by Bennett Sturts, who was at Drake with Ben McCollum. And this is a team, Ben McCollum is a guy who won immediately at Drake. I think the expectation is that he will win immediately at Iowa, especially with Bennett Sturts. When you look at Fana's top 25, they are not in it, but he has them as his first team out. Bart Torvik has them at number 31. And Rutgers is a team that loses a ton of talent from last season. Look, they have those 2 guys in Bailey and Harper, the freshmen, the top 5 recruits, and things did not go as planned. Those guys were very good, but as a team, it just didn't happen for Rutgers the way they had hoped to. So this is probably, when you say one of these teams is not like the other, Rutgers is probably not like Illinois and Iowa, but I think getting 2 of those 3 teams that you play home and away as likely tournament teams is very good, just in terms of giving you more and more opportunities to pick up quality wins. Now, the Big Ten, like always, is going to have a bunch of tournament teams. There are going to be a bunch of good teams, a bunch of teams that are protected seeds, a bunch of teams that make the NCAA tournament. It is always a deep league. When you look at the teams Maryland plays only at home, it's Indiana, it's Michigan, it's Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Purdue, and Washington. That's exciting schedule to me, because the 2 teams that stand out are Purdue, who is number 1 in Fanta's preseason, way too early preseason poll, and Michigan, and they're also number 3 in Bart Torvik. And then you have Michigan, who is a top team right now, number 6 in Fanta's poll, number 5 in Torvik. So that's some big time games just to get excited about as a fan. You also have Indiana that completely overturns their roster, turns over their roster as they bring in new head coach Darren DeVries. And of course, his son, Tucker DeVries, will follow him from West Virginia. He's a very good player as well. They're a team that's expected to compete for a tournament berth. Oregon, number 25 in John Fana's way too early top 25. That's some really good chances at home to get some big time wins. And we know what kind of impact the Xfinity Center can have. So Purdue coming in and Michigan coming in, that's really exciting to me, both just as a someone who wants to see Maryland play big games at home, but also as an opportunity to pick up some big time home wins against top competition. And then on the road, Maryland will play UCLA, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Northwestern, and USC. And UCLA, number 12 in Fanta's poll. Michigan State, number 18. Wisconsin, number 21. And then South Carolina, that's going to be the game against Rodney Rice. They also pick up Chad Baker-Mazara in the transfer portal. USC, a program that was really kind of throwing some money around this offseason with Eric Musselman at the helm to upgrade his roster. So I think the Big Ten in 2026 is going to be very deep. I think it works out kind of as you would expect, where you're going to play some really good teams at home. You're going to play some really good teams on the road. I don't see anything crazy as far as those splits go. It's the Big Ten. There's 18 teams. You're going to play good teams everywhere. But it does excite me that Maryland gets some additional opportunities at quality wins with having Illinois and Iowa twice. And it does excite me that two top 10 teams preseason, most likely, in Purdue and Michigan, are going to be coming to the Xfinity Center. So I will definitely dive more into all these teams and talk about why they are where they are, what I see from them, what they're losing, what they're bringing back, best case scenarios, worst case scenarios. I will do all that as the summer goes on. From a Purdue perspective, it's Braden Smith, it's Trey Kaufman-Renn, and it's Fletcher Lawyer all coming back. They make some good transfer portal additions as well, but Braden Smith, defending Big Ten Player of the Year, he comes back. Trey Kaufman-Renn, one of the best players in the Big Ten, he comes back. They are going to be a force to be reckoned with in the season ahead. And of course, they have Matt Painter, one of the best coaches in the country. So there's a lot to dive into there. That's my very early take on Maryland's opponents. We don't know when these games will take place yet. We don't know the sequencing. That is a big deal. And, I know not a lot of what Kevin Willard had to say is popular right now, but I do think that's something that he was right about, is how these games shake out and what the schedule looks like does really matter. So we will find out more about that soon. But those are the teams Maryland will play and where they will play them. That's the show for today. Thanks so much for listening. Again, don't forget to rate, subscribe, share the show with a friend. I really do appreciate you doing that, and it really does help the show. You can also check me out all across social media at Gorg on Sports. I am going to be doing this new 295 Sports Minute thing. The teams that you care about, the stories that you care about in Baltimore, in DC, everywhere in between, in 1 minute or less, across all social media platforms. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Until next time, this has been the Route 1 Rundown.